Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. This morning, we're going to expose Trump's America First ultimatum to Canada, demanding sovereignty in exchange for a 175 billion missile shield, which is known as the Golden Dome. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is slamming President Donald Trump's trillion-dollar spending spree, calling it a betrayal of the DOGE anti-waste mission. So again, it seems as though that these two are at an indifference or at an impasse, so to speak, because now Elon Musk is publicly coming out and saying that the one big beautiful bill is not advantageous to the mission and to some of the actions that DOGE were doing to cut government fraud, waste, and abuse. Also, Trump throws shade at Putin, factoring the MAGA unity, controversial pardons that Donald Trump has made that trigger outrage over public corruption, because a lot of people that Donald Trump, and we're going to go over those names. We're going to go over those names. A lot of people that Donald Trump has been granted pardons have been connected to Donald Trump in some form or fashion. And there's all sorts of corruption and fraud and wiretaps, you name it. It's all over the board. As well as we're going to cover South African President Ramsey breaks silence on what he called a very bizarre Oval Office confrontation and a Medicare Advantage bombshell that's going to reveal billions in fraud, abuse, and government waste. So without haste, we're going to jump right into Elon Musk has never been shy about calling out the amount of government waste that we have in our government. One of the main reasons why President Trump appointed him to be head of DOGE. And of course, Elon Musk quite recently stepped down within the past month or so because of all the billions of dollars he was losing with Tesla and the stock. And again, foregoing his public, and corporate private obligations to his stakeholders and his board of directors. They said, get your buck back here or we're going to vote you out. So that's simply what happened in a nutshell. But this time, Elon Musk, he's coming straight for Trump's latest budget. According to Musk, the massive new spending package directly undercuts the watchdog reforms by the Department of Government Efficiency, better known as, of course, DOGE. Now, in a post on X, Musk said, I quote, "You can't say you're fighting wasteful government spending and then sign a $1 trillion pork sandwich." Now, we understand that shot's fired. That's throwing President Donald Trump under the bus. And President Trump has a strong affinity for Elon Musk. He loves the guy to a certain degree because ever since I saw that rocket go up and it came down and it slowed down and then the thing, he was so dramatic. He was so theatrical trying to explain how Elon Musk technology captured the rocket so we can reuse it once again, or the booster rockets, whatever you want to call it, for you space nuts out there. I love kind of the space technology and things of that nature, but I digress. But he publicly came out and say, how are you going to do two things at the same time? You're essentially going against the mission and some of the actions that DOGE took with this one big beautiful bill. And even Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, came out, shots fired at President Trump, which I thought they were, drinking buddies. They were smoking cigars and stuff together. They was having a great time. But ever since he stepped down, he's been more vocal about some of the things that President Trump is doing. So again, who's telling the truth? Who's alluding? And again, this is my question to a lot of people who believe that President Trump can't do any wrong. He's just a man. And as men and women, we can all make mistakes. But we have to call these mistakes out so we can let the president know that you are on the wrong trajectory of running the country in some regards. Not on all accounts, not in all sectors, but on some accounts. There's some of the things you're doing that's contradictory to what the people voted you into office for. I think that's very important to note and let the president know that the reasons why the American people put you into office, some of the action that you're taking is basically pulling back the hands of time. Now, Trump changes his tone on President Putin, is raising serious eyebrows with his base. Once dubbed Putin's pal, and I tell you, they bumping elbows together, so to speak. Trump's recent jabs at the Russian president, calling his action in Ukraine strategically dumb, are drawing backlash from MAGA loyalists, could this be a strategic pivot or a sign of deeper geopolitical shifts? Is the so-called MAGA concentrate, are they going to move away from President Trump? Or they're going to cling even closer and triple down on some of the rhetoric that he spoke about when it comes to President Putin? Again, these are all small scaling steps that could lead to conflict, that could lead to certain battles or American troops on the ground. Do we want American troops on the ground in Ukraine to reinforce their numbers? Absolutely not. Do we want American troops on ground to then invade Russia? Absolutely not. We want our American troops home, increasing the defense and security of America against foreign and domestic terrorists and foreign and domestic threats. So again, a lot of this tough talk goes kind of back and forth, and this could essentially lead to warfare on the ground. And I don't think no American citizens want that. If no one's invading or trying to attack America, we've already given billions of dollars of resources and equipment and money to Ukraine, even drone technologies, as well as drones. A lot of those EU nations, a lot of those NATO nations, they need to start stepping up and providing better security and resources for Ukraine. America has been footing the bill for the past 2 or 3 years or so. And it's been really hurting our bottom line as we're trying to get our country together. So again, these are some of the things that I think that we really need to double and triple down on as American citizens. Now, I don't know if you know about this. This is still going on. I've been reporting on this for the past 3 or 4 months or so, ever since President Trump has come into office. Because this one sounds like a movie plot, in my opinion, because Trump has reportedly offered Canada a free ride under the $175 billion Golden Dome missile defense system. But here's the kicker. They've had to become America's 51st state in order to get this technology, in order to get this equipment. And believe me, a lot of people are calling it a sovereignty heist. Supporters say it's a masterstroke, a regional defense strategy. This is another way that he's trying to somehow annex Canada to be part of America or a territory of America or a state of America. And this is why King Charles III went over to Canada and say, hey, this is preposterous, in his English accent. This is, no, I'm kidding. But nonetheless, this is one of the reasons. And here's the thing. We have the turf trade. And this is what I think a lot of people are not understanding about global dynamics and the current environment that we live in today. It's okay to make a couple of, people who are indifferent, a couple of countries who are indifferent with America. We have enough enemies already, but making more enemies, making enemies out of your friends and making friends out of your enemies. At this point, he's doing neither. He's making everybody an enemy. There's certain, procedures, political procedures and diplomatic steps that President Trump needs to take. So the friends that we have are the friends that we keep. But we can't make Western nations like Canada, who's at our footstep. Yeah, we're more powerful than Canada. We can topple Canada probably in a week or so because we're right there. I mean, we can drop bombs on it. We can decimate the entire country. That's not something that we want to do. Canada I've been to Canada a couple of times, very peaceful nation, really cool people up there in Canada. They're not really at war. And I don't believe Canada really has any enemies. Think about that. The only enemies that I can recall in Canada's history, and of course, I know you guys can correct me in the comment section, is Spain and America. It's Spain and America. Now, of course, to this day, Canada doesn't have any Western powers, let alone any Eastern powers that are so-called the enemies of their state. Now, they do have conflicts with countries like India with cyber attacks, Russia with cyber attacks, but all of this is over the internet. When it comes to physical attacks, I think the only two terrorist groups that Canada has a threat with is ISIS and Al-Qaeda. historically and to this current day, because a lot of the factions that derive in Canada, as people can practice their own religions and have their own freedoms, similar to America, similar to the UK, etc. So again, Canada really doesn't have any Western, Eastern, or really powerful nations that are ready to ride against Canada. They just don't have that. So again, we're making enemies of a country that we've been allies and doing partnerships and trades for a very long time. So again, I believe he really needs to dial back the rhetoric. And for people who believe that Donald Trump can't do any wrong, he can do a lot of wrong just as well. President Biden has done a lot of wrong just as well. President Obama did a lot of wrong just as well. President Bush has done a lot of wrong just as well. President William Clinton has done a lot of wrong. All of these presidents have done a lot of wrong, but what are they doing right for the American people? That is your question, and I know it. The question is, we can sign legislation, we can sign bills, and I get it. It's going to take a long time for these things to transform inside the government so it can then trickle down to the American people. Sounds good on paper, sounds good on headlines, but when do we receive the benefits of all these actions? And nobody knows. People can speculate, oh, it takes 2 or 3 years for a lot of the legislation to move past through the government and down to the state and the local municipalities and da-da-da-da-da. That's what usually happens. All right. So Trump's latest pardons are reigniting debate over how committed the Justice Department is to fighting public corruption. Among these pardons were individuals convicted of bribery and fraud, and the move has critics accusing the DOJ of political favoritism and double standards. No, it's not. It's not the DOJ. It's not the DOJ. This is President Donald Trump. Let me tell you why, because I think it's imperative that we go down a lot of the people who have been pardoned by President Trump. These number of individuals are criminals, okay? White-collar criminals to the most part. But nonetheless, let's talk about some of them. Todd and Julie Chrisley, who were reality TV stars convicted of bank fraud and tax evasion. You're going to hear that a lot. Scott Jenkins, a former Virginia sheriff, convicted of bribery and fraud. So that means he was corrupt. That means he was corrupt. Here he is. This is Scott Jenkins on your screen, guys. He was convicted, okay? He was convicted of bribery and fraud. What was he being bribed of, and what was the fraud that he was committing? That's one thing they're not trying to reveal. You also have Rod Blacklogic, the former Democratic governor of Illinois, who was convicted on corruption charges related to bribery. His sentence was commuted in 2020 and received a full pardon in February of 2025. Now, as I'm reading some of these names are going to be unfamiliar. Some of these names are going to be very infamous. You're going to recognize them as soon as I say their names. And in some parts, they are tied, connected, linked to President Trump in some of the things he was accused of in relation to all of these different states and jurisdictions and how people was hush, hush, and closed mouths. So here's the thing. I can agree with President Trump on deporting illegal immigration. I can agree with President Trump in creating a department so we can thwart out fraud, waste, and abuse. There's a lot of things that I can agree with him in. But then there's a lot of things I can't agree with him in, because now this is more personal and this is more political theater for him to render the promises that he made to certain people if they just didn't say anything. And I'm not saying this sheriff here who was convicted, okay, this former sheriff here who was convicted, that he and somehow had some part in any criminality that President Trump might have been in. I'm not stating that. But again, there's a lot of ties, links, and connections here. Michelle Foray, a former Republican Las Vegas City Council member convicted of conspiracy and wire fraud related to misused fundraising. Again, money. Brian Kessley, a former Republican Tennessee state senator who was convicted of campaign finance related fraud. Remember when the Trump administration was talking about A lot of Republicans on Fox News and a lot of people around the nation was talking about all the fraud waste that was occurring in the Kamala Harris administration and how they were garnering these $1 million and they were paying off people so they can influence certain demographics of people so they can vote for Kamala Harris. This is the same thing, folks. That's why I tell you guys time in and time out that when you pick a side, and people are like, well, you got to pick a side. No, you do not. You don't have to label yourself as a Republican. You don't have to label yourself as a Democrat or independent or a liberal or conservative or libertarian. You don't have to label yourself as anything. You're just an American citizen. And at the end of the day, you do want some part of how the political infrastructure is ran in America. And when you're looking at the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate, what policies more align with your goals and what you want in your life and your family, that's who you vote for. If this 4 years, President Donald Trump was the best pick for you, so you voted for President Donald Trump. The next 4 years, it could be a Democratic nominee. Just don't say, oh, no, I'm never going to vote Democrat because that means that you become a party hoe. I said it. You become a party hoe where no matter what nobody says, no matter what the other side's going to do, you just know that this side is totally evil, thick and through 100% of the time, that there's never going to be a really good candidate on the Democratic side. So you always going to, vote Republican. And then the same for people on the Republican side, on the Democratic side. Oh, I'll never vote Republican because ain't nothing but MAGA and racists over there, and they're only going to do things that are going to enrich their rich friends and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No. That is when you become a very monolithic voter and you can't see outside your party. You like a horse with the blinders on. You just keep going straight no matter what happens. Oh, I'm stepping on some volcano lava. Yep, I'm stepping on spikes. You just keep going on in the same path that you're going on. And I believe that's when you become very blind to the politics that we have in this country and that you need to look at all legislation in both sides. And here's another thing. I wasn't going to even go this long today, but I just have to give it off. Stop judging the people. Stop judging the candidates. Judge their legislation, because one side can demonize the other side to make either side look bad. That's why they always have these political commercials to make one candidate look more evil than the other candidate, which didn't have you to vote. See, a lot of those commercials, now don't get me wrong, in those commercials are a lot of truth, okay? But again, if you want to be a well-educated voter, you're not just going to look at commercials. You're not just going to look at Fox News or CNN. You're going to look at all of that. You're going to assume all of that. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is what's in black and white. What legislations are you going to pass? But let me get back on this list. This list is very important. Paul Walzak, who was a Florida healthcare executive in prison on tax charges. Paul Manafort, his former campaign chairman convicted of financial crimes. Roger Stone, a political operative and advisor convicted of lying to Congress, witness tampering, and obstruction. So these guys are doing things all across the board. And as I'm saying these names, I know this is kind of jogging you guys' memory. What about Michael Flynn, his former national security advisor who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI? Steve Bannon, his former chief strategist who was facing fraud charges. George Papadopoulos, a former campaign aide who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Joe Aparo, a former Arizona chief convicted of criminal contempt. Michael Milken, a former financier convicted of racketeering and security fraud. Bernard Kirk, a former New York City police commissioner who served time for tax fraud and false statements. Dinesh D'Souza, I know you guys are familiar with this Indian racist, a conservative commentator convicted of campaign finance violation. And these are some of the same people that people are listening to, that they are painting this very vivid picture of certain demographics or certain political parties while they are committing crimes themselves. And I know a lot of people who are strong right, who are MAGA concentrate, who are Republican conservatives, that they just can't see no wrong on the right side of the house. They're going to say that the liberals convicted these innocent people and pumped them up on charges, even though that a lot of these people committed to the crimes that they were accused of, or they had very significant evidence. That's why I tell you, in the rule of law in America, there's no morals and there's no ethics. I wonder, why didn't President Trump pardon Diddy? I'm just kidding. He shouldn't be pardoned. I'm just kidding. I don't know enough information, but here's another thing about the Diddy case. And I know this is just a one-off very quickly. If you guys are following the Diddy case, what they're coming to a junction in this, in his court case, is that there's really no persecuting, solidifying evidence other than Diddy being a very grotesque freak and these freak-offs, other than some very minor crimes like paying off people as far as for them to have sexual acts, that he really didn't do anything illegal. Or they can't prove that he did anything illegal. And I'm not saying I'm for Diddy getting off, okay? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of this information they don't have the evidence for that may went down or occurred. But as a lot of people were stating, who is part of Diddy's ecosystem? Diddy didn't do all this by himself, right? There's a whole entourage of people that surrounds Diddy that were handling a lot of the armed actions of these so-called freaks off and a lot of these egregious sexual encounters that he was having. Again, the first question, and I know it's very difficult. Throw out your morals, throw out your compassion, throw out your ethics, throw all of it out. And then ask yourself this one simple question. Anything that he did, can they prove that it was against the law? That's all I'm asking. But let me continue here, because I left off with Dinesh D'Souza, I believe, of campaign finance violation. And then 7 Republican congressmen. 7 Republican congressmen. You have Chris Collins, Duncan D. Hunter, Steve Stockman, Rick Renzi, Robin Hayes, Mark Salinger, Randall Duke Cunningham, and at least 10 healthcare executives and doctors convicted in a very large-scale Medicare fraud schemes. Wait a minute. Medicare fraud schemes. And here's another thing, folks. We're going to go over Medicare Advantage. How it's now coming under fire from DOGE. And if you had Medicare fraud and now Medicare is going over an audit from DOGE, you then pardon the people who was part of the Medicare fraud, waste, and abuse. That is contradictory to the rule of law in America. They committed fraud for a government healthcare plan because they're part of the government. Then we have a government agency doing audit on fraud, waste, abuse in Medicare. And then you pardon the people who are part of the fraud, waste, and abuse. Boy, white supremacy takes both sides of the argument. Shout out to Neely Fuller. 4 black water guards convicted of killing Iraqi citizens. Charles Kushner, who is the father of his son-in-law, Ivanka Trump husband, who was convicted of tax evasion, witness tampering, and illegal campaign contributions. Many individuals charged or convicted in connection with the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot, Capitol protest, Capitol everything else. And these pardons have drawn strong criticism, with some arguing that they highlight a pullback by the Justice Department from public corruption cases and undermine efforts to hold officials accountable. So it's almost like if you're part of the government, you somehow can, and you have connection to the president, I mean, you're above the law, because anything you do, he like, I'm just going to pardon you. Like, give me a couple of months, put you on house arrest, pay a fine, put you in white collar crime jail. That's kind of like a vacation home for criminals. But I'm going to pardon you guys as soon as I get in office. I'm going to pardon you guys as soon as you commit the crime. These are some of the things I definitely don't agree with the actions of President Trump. And again, a lot of these crimes that they actually have like evidence for, not just hearsay, not just the so-called liberals. I digress. Let me move on here. So you have President Ramsey, and I know I always mispronounce his name, but I just call him President Ramsey, of South Africa. He is finally speaking out about his tense Oval Office meeting with President Donald Trump and what he describes as surreal. And Trump reportedly pressured him on unverified claims about land seizures and white genocide. Ramsey calls the encounter a low point in diplomatic engagement. That's a president speaking. And I'm not saying one is more presidential than the other, but at least what he's saying seems more presidential than, unfortunately, our president. And I'm all for America, okay? I'm not for any, I'm all for America winning. But at the same time, when you have two powerful nations, and to a certain degree, South Africa is somewhat powerful, but not in relation to America, okay? In relation to other African countries, but nonetheless, this is being very diplomatic. He is saying it was a low point in diplomatic engagement. So he was being even presidential in those regards. I just wanted to point that out very, very quickly. Now, last but not least, as I was stating before, the Department of Government Efficiency is turning the spotlight on Medicare Advantage plans, citing overbilling, deceptive practices, and ballooning efficiencies. Millions of seniors rely on these plans, but they're being shortchanged by corporate and political interests, believe it or not. And I just want to, let me blow this up for you guys, because I do want to read some excerpts here from this particular story. It states here, let me blow this up even more so for you guys, because of the way that the Medicare Advantage payments are structured. Payouts are often adjusted upwards, so they always up the payments, and part of the additional over-the-counter benefits not found in traditional Medicare. Some Medicare Advantage plans may use more aggressive diagnosis finding than what the patient actually has, a practice known as upcoding that raises reimbursements. It goes on to state, Medicare Advantage plans receive risk adjustment payments based on the diagnosis they submit for enrollees, meaning higher payments for patients with more serious or chronic conditions. To verify the accuracy of these claims, CMS conducts risk adjustment data validations, audits to confirm that Medicare records support diagnosis used for payments. Currently, CMS is severely years behind in completing these audits. The last significant recovery of MA overpayments occurring following the audit of payment year of 2007. Despite federal estimations suggesting MA plans may overbill the government by approximately $17 billion annually. And the question is, where in the hell is all that money going? $17 billion? Wait a minute. Didn't I just tell you guys that you had all these doctors and political figures part of this Medicare scam, and then they got pardoned? And I've stated this statement multiple times. It seems as though when people become political figures, in 3 to 5 years, now don't get me wrong, a lot of these political, once they reach to be a congressman or a senator, they become to a higher echelon of government positions. 3 to 5 years, it seems as though a lot of these politicians on both sides become millionaires. I mean, still to this day, we have political figures like Nancy Pelosi, where investors like myself are looking at Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio because they get the IPO, they get the information, they get the technological sheet, they get the procurement sheets before everybody else. So they know when to invest in the IPO. So they get it at a very marginal price. They're part of some of the supporting investors before the IPO is even released. So when they said, we have a projected stock price of $15, and then a month before the stock is released, that $15 turned into $25. That's because they got more private investors to invest inside the company, which then raises the value of the stock, and then have you and me to invest in the stock. And then once the stock raises to $35, $50, they sell off a couple of their thousands of shares that they bought, and then the stock prices drop. And then from that point on, you see like an EKG goes up and down, up and down. You're looking at the relative strength index, so on and so forth. And you're looking at when you should pull out or you should buy more. But it's a big scam that the government has direct access to stocks even before they're released, even before they release the IPO. So how do you believe a lot of these people become millionaires? Last but not least, give me your reaction and your comments below. Thank you for joining me here this morning. If you're new to Blacklogic, please hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you're notified every time I release a video or go live. Thank you for joining me. And I just want you to chime in on this particular video clip. And I want to know your thoughts, okay? I want to know your thoughts on it and what you guys think altogether.
Oh my God. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Heck, I got no video. Taser. Ah! She got taser. Oh my God. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Heck, I got no video. Taser. Ah! She got taser.
Yeah. Usually black people are a lot faster. Her being the police officer, she probably need to lose about 20 some pounds, but beautiful black sister did her job. And the reason why, now I'm not going back until the whole clip, just this part right here, regardless of what took place. This lady here basically said F the person who's recording, then pulled down her pants, which is indecent exposure. Because anytime anyone does something that's indecent exposure is for sexual gratification or to offend someone. And that's like, people are telling them put down their pants, kiss my butt or kiss, that's the way they would do. But I've seen people say it. I've never really seen it. Maybe I've seen it once or twice. I don't think I've really seen it. I know people said it all the time. Maybe you guys have seen it before. But this person actually did it in front of a police officer. Then after she indecent exposure and the police officer reached out to detain her because of her indecent exposure, which is against the law, evaded arrest. She started to run away from the police officer. She evaded arrest. And she resisted arrest. So she resisted arrest. First, let's put them in order. Indecent exposure, resisted arrest, then evaded arrest, and then the police officer had to chase her down and shoot her with a taser gun. If you notice, she did not use a firearm. She went to a taser. She said, taser. We're going to look at that one more time. Can we look at this one more time? Because I want to make sure you guys, again, I know it's not the full clip, but we're looking at the actions of police officer as well as the assailant here who's running away from police officer.
Oh my God. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Heck, I got no video. Taser. Ah! She got taser.
Yeah. Indecent exposure, resisting arrest, evading arrest, all of the above.
Oh my God. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Heck, I got no video. Taser, taser, taser. Taser, taser. Ah! She got tasered.
But nonetheless, she broke the law, and at least 3 charges should be coming against her. But thank you guys for joining me here this morning. You guys have a great and wonderful day. This is Blacklogic.